When I walked in, I saw a glow on the bathroom carpet. It was the reflection of sunlight that had just begun to filter through the blinds. It wasn't blinding, it just caught my eye. I looked down to see what it was. I was barefoot and didn't want to step on glass or anything else. Caroline hadn't said she'd dropped anything in the bathroom, but who knows? At first, I didn't pay any attention to it because without the light, it was almost the same color as the carpet, but eventually, I found it. A tiny circle of foil had fallen on the floor, reflecting the light that had caught my eye when I entered the bathroom. I picked it up. It was a pill in foil, a small circle that you squeeze out when you take a pill out of a blister pack. Usually, it stays attached to the blister pack, but sometimes, as in this case, it breaks off and falls on the floor. I examined it. One side was empty, but the other had a mark on it. 2. Since it was Wednesday, I figured that meant Tuesday, yesterday's pill. That meant the pill had to be taken every day. I knew I wasn't taking any medication. I'm 35 years old and as healthy as a horse, just like my wife Caroline. We had both recently had our annual checkups and were declared healthy and fit. So why was there a pill lying in my bathroom? I knew there were many pills that needed to be taken daily, but one of them immediately caught my attention. It was a birth control pill. Caroline didn't take birth control pills, at least I didn't think so, because 2 years ago, after the birth of our second and last child, I had a vasectomy. She didn't have any problems with cramps or pain during her period. She was one of those lucky women who had periods without any problems. So why the pill? I admit the first thought that crossed my mind was that she might have some kind of illness she didn't want to tell me about. For a few minutes, my thoughts wandered to the darkest places, but then I remembered the medical examination and the test results we had shown each other. We were both healthy. If the little foil circle was here, then the pills were probably here too. I closed and locked the door. Caroline was still lying in bed and I started searching. It took me a while to find them, but I finally did. They were hidden at the bottom of a box of tampons, in a box of aspirin. When I pulled out the strip of pills, I knew right away that they were the same ones she had been taking before I did the circumcision, and even before we started trying to have a baby. Why had she started taking the pills again? I had only one answer to that question. She was sleeping with someone who could get her pregnant. She was cheating on me. Caroline and I had been together for 9 years. I had just graduated from college and was studying to be an engineer, and she was working as a secretary. We met in a bar, and although we didn't immediately like each other, she showed enough interest to accept my invitation to dinner. Caroline was tall, only 2 inches shorter than me, 178 cm. She was a former athlete and had retained her athletic build, slim figure, and small breasts. We dated for about a year and then got married when I was 26. Our children were 5 and 2, and I had surgery to prevent further accidents. 2 was our limit. We had the perfect family, first James, then Sonia. I had the perfect family, at least that's how it seemed to me. Caroline went back to work after taking maternity leave after each child was born and didn't want to leave her beloved job. We had a helper who came in during the day to look after the children and left in the evening. Her services cost almost as much as Caroline earned, but Caroline didn't care. She just wanted to get out of the house and do the job she loved. I worked with a few friends, and together we started an engineering firm. We would never be rich, but we lived very comfortably. I cleaned up the bathroom, put the pills back where I found them, and decided I needed to think. There was no point in confronting her now. I needed a plan. I needed proof. What would happen after that? I had no idea. Let's gather all the facts first and then we'll see what happens. I went to work as usual and started thinking about options. First, I wanted to find out who and when, and also how long. Was it someone from work, God forbid, her boss? Could it be someone she had been seeing since we met? That led me to the next terrible question. Were these children even mine? All this time, I didn't let my emotions get in the way of what was happening. I knew this would happen, that I would feel loss, betrayal, pain, and anger. But first, I needed to find out if it was really true. I was working on the problem, but I didn't have enough facts yet to draw any conclusions. I went online. First, I needed DNA testing kits. Testing the children would be, child's play. I often put them to bed before Caroline arrived, so it would be easy to do. I also ordered surveillance equipment, a couple of small voice recorders that I could hide in her car and bag, and a few tiny cameras that I would hide around the house. I doubted she did it there, considering she had a maid and was rarely there when I wasn't. At least I thought so. I needed access to her phone. I knew of a cloning program that could get me a copy of her phone, all her messages and emails, and even listen to her calls. To do this, I needed to buy another phone. It took a few days to arrive. All that time, I watched closely. Caroline didn't do anything unusual. Our sex life was pretty standard, once or twice a week, usually on weekends when we both went to bed late. I never noticed any suspicious smells coming from her, and she didn't rush to take a shower as soon as she got home. Nothing had changed. So either she wasn't having an affair, or she was extremely careful, or she had been having an affair for so long that it had become second nature to her. On Friday morning, the packages arrived. I had them delivered to my office so no one would ask any questions. I had DNA test kits, voice recorders, several cameras, a cell phone, and a cloning kit. I was ready to get started. I left work early that day. When I got home, my assistant was feeding the children dinner and getting them ready for bed. I left her alone and went to hide the cameras. One in the bathroom, one in the living room, and one in the bedroom, where it had a clear view of the bed. I heard the children splashing in the bathroom and went to help them get ready for bed. I took Sonia and left the maid with James. I took a swab from Sonia's cheek and put it in my pocket. Then I put her to bed and read to her until she fell asleep. When I looked into the room, James was still awake and the housekeeper was reading to him. I offered to take over and let her go home, and she gratefully accepted. It didn't take long to take the swabs, and in less than 20 minutes, he was fast asleep too. I packed the swabs together with the one I had taken from my cheek and put them in the mailbox. The mailman would pick them up in the morning. The service promised that the results would be available online within 48 business hours. That is, last Wednesday. Caroline came home on time and we went about our usual business. She told me about her day. I told her about mine, and neither of us listened to each other. We had dinner, and then she took a shower. I took this opportunity to install voice recorders in her car and bag and copy her cell phone. I checked the copy for compromising messages or emails but found nothing. Either she was very careful or she wasn't cheating on me. I couldn't decide. The weekend passed as usual. We had sex in the mornings before the kids woke up. It had become almost a ritual, almost a routine. If we managed to do it before one of the kids woke up, we considered it a victory. The success rate was about 50%. Since she was always the first to wake up, she almost always won. She didn't call or text on the weekend, and since we spent all our time together, I had no way of checking whether she was taking her pills, although I did check the package and the relevant days were clear. Since it was just the two of us at home on the weekend and I wasn't taking the pills, I made a reasonable assumption that she was taking them. On Monday, I told her I would be working from home. She left for the office, and I took the opportunity to remove the flash drives from all the cameras and check them. The camera in the bathroom confirmed that she had indeed been taking the pills, but the real surprise came from the camera in the bedroom. On Saturday evening, while I was cooking dinner, she went to take a shower. In the bedroom, I saw her texting someone on her phone. There was nothing on the cloned phone, so she must have a second phone. It definitely wasn't in her bag, so where could it be? I watched what she did with her phone when she finished texting. She went to the vent, opened the latch, and hid the phone inside. I immediately went to check the vent and found that the phone wasn't there. She must have hidden it there when she was home, but she takes it with her when she leaves. I needed to get access to that phone. This was the first concrete evidence that she was up to something, although I still didn't know what. There were signs that she was cheating, but this wasn't definitive proof. I looked at the recording of her getting dressed in the morning and saw her take the phone off the air conditioner and put it in her bag before leaving. I needed that phone. In the evening, when she came home, I watched her closely. She casually threw her bag in the hallway and went about her usual evening routine. After dinner, she went to take a shower and I looked in her bag. The cell phone wasn't there. She must have taken it with her and hidden it in the air conditioner when she went upstairs. She didn't know or care that Sonia's room was on the other side of the vent. Quietly, listening to the sound of the shower, I crept into my daughter's bedroom and opened the window on her side. There lay the cell phone. I grabbed it and took it to my study, where I copied all the data to my new phone in a couple of minutes. I put it back in its place and was about to close the window when I heard my wife coming out of the shower. I walked over and sat down by Sonia's bed, stroking her hair when my wife came in. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "I like to come in and sit with one of them sometimes," I whispered, just to remind myself how lucky I am to have two such wonderful daughters. She smiled. You're an old fool, she said. Come on, let's go before you wake her up. I couldn't look at the clone phone until the next day, and then my world fell apart. My secretary's call didn't reach me as I sat in my office chair staring at the clone phone, tears streaming down my face. Finally, she must have gotten tired of trying and knocked on the door before entering my office. She poked her head in and saw me. Michelle, my secretary, was a frivolous woman who dressed much older than her age. I would have guessed her to be somewhere between 30 and 40. She was slim, with red hair and green eyes. She always dressed conservatively, in clothes that would not suit someone much older. Our relationship had always been strictly professional. I never even looked at her, even though I saw what happened when someone else did. It was unattractive. I had to talk to one of my business partners who was known as the office womanizer. He was flirting with her because he couldn't stand the thought that a woman wasn't falling for his charms. She told me straight out that if he didn't stop, she would sue the company not only for firing her, but also for sexual harassment. She told me that the only reason she hadn't done so yet was because I had always treated her with respect and never done anything I shouldn't have. My business partner was furious and wanted to fire her immediately. He gave us an ultimatum. Either she leaves or he leaves. So I became the owner of 60% of the company instead of the 40% I started with. I was missing one partner. When Michelle saw me, she immediately backed away, obviously to sort out what she wanted to say to me. I heard voices in the far office, and then everything went quiet. Michelle returned to my office, closed the door, and locked it. Then she came over, pulled up a chair on the other side of my desk, and sat down across from me, a few feet away. She took some tissues from where women always keep them and handed them to me. I took them blindly and began to wipe my eyes. Tell me. That was all she said. I showed her my phone. There were text messages from Caroline and replies. The sender's name wasn't listed, but the messages talked about secret meetings and sex that seemed to go on forever. Whoever it was, he knew her well, talking about things only I should have known. A small mole on the inside of her thigh. Other details that only a lover could know, and not just any lover. A long-term lover. I was never mentioned on these messages, as if I didn't exist. There was no he didn't agree, no he said or did this or that. I simply didn't exist. I wasn't even mentioned. Do you know who it is? She asked, still businesslike. I shook my head. How do you know? She asked. I told her about finding the small silver bookmark on the bathroom floor and then about the pills. The words just poured out of me the whole time I was talking. She just sat there looking at me. After a while, I realized she was holding my hand. I thought it was the first time we had ever really connected. You need more information, she said. The children's DNA will be available on Wednesday. Can you wait until then? I don't know, I replied. She nodded. Our producers in Portland need to meet with you immediately, she said. I booked you a ticket on the next flight. You'll be back on Thursday. I can't think about that right now, I said. Give this to Caroline, she said. She took my phone, typed a text message, and sent it to Caroline. There's been a mix-up in Portland. I need to go and sort it out. I'll be back on Thursday. Love you. The reply came almost immediately. Okay, let me know when you get there. See you when you get back. She pressed her lips to the phone and stared at it intently, then handed it back to me and took out her phone. Lorraine, she said. Michelle. Yes, thank you. Are you free this afternoon? Great. See you then. Go get yourself cleaned up, she said to me in a businesslike tone. That tone, and the fact that she had trained me to do exactly what she said in the office, meant that I did exactly that. In fact, it was kind of nice not to have to think, to pass the decisions and plans on to someone else. When I came out of this bathroom, she was holding my jacket. Where are we going? I asked. You have a meeting with an old friend of mine, she replied. I just went. As it turned out, Lorraine was Michelle's best friend and her divorce lawyer. Apparently, she had been handling Michelle's divorce when she caught her husband with one of his colleagues. Michelle explained the situation to Lorraine, and I watched the scene unfold in a daze. This wasn't happening to me. Lorraine had obviously seen this many times in her career. After hearing everything we had to say, she turned her attention to me. Gary, she said. It wasn't me. She was talking to someone else. I felt a burning sensation on my cheek. Michelle had slapped me. I was in shock and came to my senses. I saw shock and surprise in Lorraine's eyes, but they quickly disappeared when she looked at me. Gary? She asked. I nodded. Do you even know what to do with him? My engineering brain kicked in. Plans, that's what it was for. Kill them both, I said. I expected at least a shocked gasp from Michelle, but to my surprise, she just smiled. Okay, said Lorraine. I understand, but unfortunately that's not an option. You see, it's against the law. However, we do have a few legal options. Let's discuss them. Before we start, she said, I'm just offering you options. I don't support any of them yet. We can talk about that later. The first option is to do nothing. She doesn't know that you know. But as far as I understand, you've had a pretty happy life and that shouldn't change. Keep things as they are. Pretend you don't know anything. Option 2 is a divorce by mutual consent. Cite irreconcilable differences in the documents, divide the company, the house, and the retirement account. She earns less than you, so you'll probably have to pay her child support for at least a few years, and child support until the children finish school. The third option? Blow everything up. File for divorce on the grounds of marital infidelity. If the children are not yours, sue for false completion of the birth certificate. Sue the other person for alienation of affection if he is the father. Sue to get back all the money you spent on the children if he is a colleague. Sue for breach of brotherhood. These days, almost all companies have such a policy. If the other person is married, give his partner all the information about the affair. If they know, we may have a case against them. If they don't know, I can represent them in divorce proceedings. Make it public, tell everyone, friends, family, colleagues. If she is a member of any societies or church groups, tell them too. Humiliate her as much as possible. We need to protect your assets. Sell your share in the company to an offshore trust, mortgage the house, take everything we can out of it. Take the cash along with the money you received from the company, cash out your pension account, and have some fun in Vegas. My head was spinning. I knew immediately what she was talking about. The first option was unacceptable. I wasn't anyone's willing cuckold. I had been insensitive and oblivious for too long. The second option? No way. I had spent too much time building the business and creating our lifestyle. She could forget about taking half of everything I had and continuing to support me while she had fun with someone else. Option 3, I said. Nuclear. Lorraine smiled. Okay, I'll start gathering documents. I suggest we start secretly watching your wife and find out who, when, and where. We need more evidence. Can I keep this cell phone? You obviously don't need it. I nodded and handed her the phone. Michelle and I left Lorraine's office and she drove me to a small family-run hotel. She booked me a room. Go take a shower and order room service, she said. She took care of everything. I'll be in touch later. I acted mechanically. My whole world was falling apart and I sat in my room and ordered room service as if I were on vacation. It was the only way I could cope with the stress of what was happening. 9 years on the toilet. But the most frustrating thing was that I hadn't noticed it at all. How could I not have noticed what she was doing? Who was this person she was returning to after the birth of each child? She told me she liked her job and her independence, but was that the real reason? Or was she simply unable to be without her lover for so long? I looked thoughtfully at the minibar and was about to give up when Michelle walked into the room. Don't even think about it, she said. You need to think, not drown your sorrows. You need to plan. And you can't do that looking at the world through the bottom of a bottle. Plan? I asked grimly. I've tried. I had a plan. And it was a good one. I had a loving wife and 2 beautiful children, and now look at me. My wife is a whore, and I don't even know if those 2 kids are mine. I'm the biggest cuckold in the world. My whole life is ruined, and you want me to make plans? She looked at me for a few seconds. I waited for her to say something, maybe sympathize with me, maybe even hug me. Then she looked at her watch. Okay, she said briskly. Enough complaining. How many times when we were starting the company did you face obstacles? Did your plans fall apart? What does that have to do with... What? She insisted. I don't know, I replied. Many times. There was a case when the patent office lost the patent application for the inversion thread, and we won the contract with Headingley's. There was a time when the bank tried to foreclose on us early because they were under pressure. There was a time... Okay, she said. At what point in all of those instances did you sit down, put your head in your hands, and give up? It varied, I replied. Why? She asked. What was different about those days? Back then I had something to fight for, I replied. I had a family that depended on me. Now you have a family, she said, that depends on you just as much. And it's a lot bigger than yours. 141 people and their families depend on you to succeed. None of your partners can keep the company afloat. You're all engineers, but you're the only businessman among the three of you. If you fail, the company fails. You think that bitch cares about the families who depend on your company? If she gets half, she'll sell it to the highest bidder, and you'll lose control of the business. You know who will buy it, and then the headlings will own everything you've worked for. Is that what you want? I stared at her. She was right. I had worked too long and too hard to give it all away to whoever would give that bitch of a wife more money. I needed to get my affairs in order to secure a future for myself and my family. If the children were mine, I would take care of them, but as for Caroline, she made her bed, and she could sleep in it with whoever she wanted. I could mourn that relationship when I was sure everything else was in order. My despondency dissipated, and driven by anger and determination, I sat down at the table with Michelle and began to make plans. I was going to secure the future of the company and take care of the only family I had left. As soon as I made that decision, everything fell into place. The pain was gone, the hesitation disappeared. I had no doubts left. Michelle noticed the change in my expression and nodded with satisfaction. That's the Gary I need right now, she said. Someone who can plan for the future. We spent the rest of the evening discussing plans to secure the company's future. At first, I suggested selling my shares to my partners, but Michelle rejected the idea. She believed that I couldn't trust them to run the company and leave it in my hands when they became the majority shareholders. They would ruin it. I needed to retain control. In the end, we decided that we could set up an offshore trust to which I would sell the company at market value. This trust would leave me as CEO with a minimal salary. I would earn practically nothing. Since the trust would be offshore, the courts would have no jurisdiction over its documents, so the owners of the trust would remain unknown. Now I was a millionaire, at least on paper, or would be when everything was finalized. I needed to get rid of all that capital. I also needed to cash out my 401k retirement account and release my entire share of the house. Although we were together when we bought the house, it was only in my name because Caroline wasn't working at the time of purchase. She was busy with James's business, and the mortgage consultant told us it would be easier to get a loan in my name. Since she wasn't earning anything at the time, I made a to-do list and emailed it to my lawyer, who handled the company's legal matters, to schedule an appointment for the next day. After Michelle left, I took a shower and went to bed, not expecting to sleep well. I fell asleep almost as soon as my head hit the pillow and didn't wake up until my phone alarm went off the next day. There was a message from Caroline on my phone. You didn't say you were coming. Is everything okay? Sorry, I was planning to stay late at work, but then I fell asleep. Everything is sorting itself out now. I'll be back on Thursday. Okay. See you later. Love you. 6. I didn't reply to the message. I just couldn't bring myself to type those words. Michelle knocked on my door a little after 8. I took another shower and thought about going out for breakfast. Breakfast, she said, motioning for me to follow her. We went to a diner on the next street and sat down at a table where we ate pancakes with bacon and maple syrup. Part of me couldn't understand why I was acting this way. It was as if my world hadn't fallen apart and my heart wasn't broken. I decided that someday, when the dust settled, it would all come crashing down on me. I wasn't looking forward to it, but right now I had a job to do. Brian Spencer, Michelle said, giving my lawyer's name, called and said he has time to meet with us at 10. We can go to your bank first and cash out your retirement account, and before that, we can release the lien on your house. I understand that we should pool our money, I said, but there will still be a record that it was all mine. Can't the court just order me to pay her half? Only if you still have it, Michelle grinned. That's where Vegas comes in handy. As soon as you get all that capital, go to Vegas for a week and blow it all. And do it before you file for divorce. That way, when the court assesses your assets, you'll be broke. In fact, you'll be in debt. The bank will take your house, and your salary will barely cover your living expenses. And that's assuming the kids aren't yours. If they are, just transfer all the money from your retirement fund into a trust fund so they can go to college. Caroline won't be able to touch it. Technically, she'll be making more than you. She'll be able to afford a house and maybe even pay you alimony. When will the DNA test results be available? The company said the results should be online today, I said, taking the phone. I checked the email the company had sent me and found the link, which I clicked on. I watched the page load, but then put the phone down. I wasn't sure I was ready to see the results. "Can I?" Michelle asked, and I pushed the phone toward her. She took it and looked at the screen, scrolling through it several times. I watched her face, looking for clues, trying to predict what she would say from her expression. She looked up from the phone. "The results aren't ready yet," she said. "According to the tracking information, they should be available within the next 12 hours. I exhaled without even realizing it. "Let's go," she said, standing up. The bank should be open by now." It took surprisingly little time to release the house from the mortgage and cash out the 401k retirement account. I closed all of our savings accounts, including the children's education accounts, and transferred the money to an account in my name only. The only account I left was the joint account we used on a daily basis. There was less than $10,000 left in that account. My lawyer made some serious changes to our plans, but if it could be done amicably, he did it. "You forgot one thing," he said when we laid out our plan. "You have a prenuptial agreement?" "Really?" I asked in surprise. I had no idea. "It was a condition of the partnership agreement when you started," he reminded me. "All partners had to sign a prenuptial agreement that protects the company in the event of a breakup. It only protects the company, but it has no claim to any of her assets. In the event of a divorce, you are an employee of the company, so at best it can claim your salary and 401k retirement plan. And that's it. I would suggest," he said, "and I don't mean this in a bad way about your divorce lawyer's plan, that you use all the capital freed up from the house in your 401k and invest it in the company. Buy out one of your partners. I know Robert has hinted that he wants to invest. You don't have enough money to do that, but you can take a loan from the company's retirement fund to cover the difference. The payments will come out of your salary, which means your income will be much lower when your assets are assessed. And since everything else will be tied to the company, it can't be touched. Your credit rating will suffer when the bank mortgages your house, and you'll lose half of what's left in your account. But other than that, you won't lose anything. We can make your salary lower than hers, so she'll even pay you alimony." "What am I going to live on?" I asked. "If my entire salary goes to pay off the loan, I still have to live somewhere and eat, not to mention that I have 2 children." I fell silent. "At least I think so." "Let's wait about the children," he said. "You've already decided what you'll do if they're not yours. Will you be involved in their lives?" "I don't know," I replied. "It's too horrible to think about. I have to wait until I'm sure before I make a decision like that." "Don't forget the other points in your lawyer's plan," he reminded me. "I'm willing to bet that you'll get enough from the lawsuit against her company to pay off the loan and get back to your full salary when this is over. Not to mention that you can claim reimbursement from the children's father if it turns out they're not yours. Since that will happen after the divorce, it won't be considered part of the settlement agreement." "Could you contact Robert and see if he's interested in selling?" I asked. "I'm not sure I can do that at the moment." He nodded. "I'll give him a call and let you know." We shook hands and left his office. As we walked out of the building, I felt a sense of relief. Plans were starting to come together, and that always gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. Then I remembered why we had made those plans. The relief disappeared, and I felt empty inside. We were sitting in a cafe having lunch when I dared to look at my phone again. Once again, I couldn't bring myself to do more than click on the link in the email before handing the phone back to Michelle. I looked at her face again, waiting for a reaction that would tell me whether or not I was a father. "I'm so sorry, Gary," she said quietly. It was the most unbusinesslike phrase I had ever heard. She handed me the phone, and I read the results myself. Neither of the children was my biological child, although they had one father, but it wasn't me. The double blow of losing both children was more than offset by the rage I felt at her betrayal. Not only had she passed both children off as mine, she had also convinced me to have a vasectomy, which meant I would never be able to have children of my own. "Gary!" Michelle shouted, bringing me back to reality. "This isn't the time or place. Just calm down. We'll get through this, I promise." I took a few deep breaths, suppressing my anger. I really wanted to seriously hurt someone. I even considered hiring a hitman to kill the bitch who gave birth to the children that should have been mine. Michelle gathered her strength again and led me out of the diner. "Lorraine called," she said. "She wants to see you." We headed to Lorraine's office. Plus, plupple. When we entered her office, Lorraine looked grim. "I have a preliminary report from the private investigator," she said. It appears that Caroline is not wasting any time. A man came to your place last night and stayed the night. We weren't able to get inside. I have cameras installed in my house, I said. I can hack the flash drives and we can see what happened. Good, she said. Do that now, and then we'll come up with a plan. I think the information on those drives will be important. There's a housekeeper there, I said. I can't go back. I have to leave town on business. Lorraine checked her cell phone. The housekeeper is at the game center with Sophie and James, she said. I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if she leaves. My house was about a 30-minute drive from Lorraine's office, and Michelle drove fast. We got there without incident, and I switched the flash drives. I quickly looked around the house, but didn't notice anything suspicious. Then we returned to Lorraine's office. We checked the flash drives. I decided not to look at the one from the bedroom. I didn't need to see what had happened there. I recognized the man as soon as he walked through the door. As I suspected, it was her boss, the man she had been working for the entire time we were together. Bill Wainwright. I was almost stunned by what happened when he pulled up to the house. First of all, he had his own key and walked right into the house. When he approached, James looked up and saw him. "Daddy Bill!" he exclaimed and ran to hug him. It was so emotional that I couldn't hold back and started crying. I couldn't watch anymore. Lorraine looked at me as I cried. Michelle, for the first time in her life, hugged me and held me close while I cried. Some time passed, but eventually I pulled myself together. "Do you want to take a break?" Lorraine asked. And I shook my head. The pain subsided a little, but anger began to overwhelm me again. "What now?" I asked. "I already have a copy of your wife's employment contract. It has a clause prohibiting friendly relationships, so you can sue the company for violating it. Since the person your wife is friends with is a senior manager at the firm, the company cannot claim that it didn't know what was going on." We told Lorraine what the company lawyer had told me and what he had advised. She smiled broadly. She picked up the phone and called him, asking for copies of the prenuptial agreement, and he emailed them to her. "Everything is perfect," she said, reading the prenuptial agreement. "Forget everything I said before. Your son's plan is perfectly reasonable. If your partner wants to get rid of the company, buy out his share. Invest everything you have in the company and it will cease operations immediately. We can sue her company for breach of contract, him for abandoning the family, her for making a false statement on the birth certificate, and both of them for the money spent on the children so far. The medical expenses for the birth alone are a hefty sum." "It all depends on whether Robert wants to sell," I said. "I guess we'll have to wait and see what he decides." Michelle drove me back to the hotel and I went up to my room. I was about to sit down on the bed when there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw her standing in the hallway. "Let's go," she said. "You can't stay here." "What?" I asked. "Why?" "Because you don't need to be alone," she replied. You'll just be thinking or raiding the minibar. I want you where I can keep an eye on you." As she said this, she gathered my things. Taking me by the hand, she led me out of the room, looked around, and walked me to her car. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding that I didn't care anymore. "To my place," she replied. "I have a spare room you can stay in." "But," I began. She turned and looked at me. I fell silent. I had never been to Michelle's house and was surprised to see that it was almost the same size as mine. Our house was 2 stories, hers was 1. She led me into a room with a bathroom. "Take a shower and get changed," she ordered. "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. We ate dinner in silence, and I'm sure the food was delicious, but I couldn't taste it. My mind was racing with thoughts that wouldn't let me relax. I was furious, but I couldn't find the strength to express it. I was devastated, but I couldn't find the strength to care. All I had the energy for at that moment was to carry out my plan. I was on autopilot. My goal was set. I was just thinking about what to do after dinner when the phone rang. I flinched, hoping it wasn't Caroline. But it wasn't Caroline. "Hi, Robert," I said listlessly. "Why?" he asked. Robert and I had been friends since college. We studied together, and it was our joint work on projects that laid the foundation for our business. At first, I got the lion's share of the company because I had more capital to invest than he did. "Caroline is cheating on me," I said in a lifeless voice, "and she's been cheating on me all this time." "All this time?" he asked incredulously. "You mean, none of the children are mine?" I replied. There was silence on the line. "So you want to tie all your assets to the company and protect yourself with a prenuptial agreement?" he asked. Either our lawyer, Brian Spencer, had explained everything to him, or he understood the partnership agreement much better than I did. I want to keep 5%, he said, and stay on as a consulting engineer. I'll work out the details with HR. The rest is yours. Okay, I said, I'll have Brian take care of the paperwork. Gary? He asked a minute later. I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it will get easier with time, I promise. I've been in a similar situation, and it got easier. Only then did I remember that he had been divorced for about 4 years. I didn't know the details because, although we were friends, he was a very private person. I only knew that it had been unpleasant. And then he talked about the prenuptial agreement. He had used one himself. The next morning, Michelle woke me up with a cup of coffee. Let's go, she said. We have a lot to do. First, we contacted Brian Spencer, the company's lawyer. He had already prepared all the documents to buy out my share from Robert, and we completed the transaction in less than half an hour. I gave him everything I had taken from the house, my savings, and my retirement plan. I had to borrow the rest from the company's retirement plan. Now, at least on paper, I owed about $1 million. My salary was cut almost in half because the payments were deducted before taxes. Then we drove to Lorraine. I showed her all the paperwork for the deal, and she was thrilled. Everything's fine, she said. I'll file the paperwork today, and we can file it on Monday if you want. We'll file for him, for her, and for the company at the same time. Where do you want her to file? Wherever is convenient for her, I replied. If you can do it through a billboard on the Super Bowl, I'd be happy to pay for it. Lorraine laughed. We'll have her pick up the papers at the office, she said. Monday at 10 a.m., unless the papers get to the court before then. If I file them today, they'll be ready tomorrow afternoon. I nodded. What now? I looked at Michelle. She was organizing everything. Okay, she said. We have 2 more things to do before you go back to the office and pretend you just got back from fighting a fire in Portland. Do you think you can be home by Monday? I guess I have to, I replied. You don't have to, she said. Tell me what you need to get through this. I don't know, I replied. Is there any good news? She smiled at me. Then let's go, she said. I was surprised when we stopped at the medical center where I had undergone all the tests and where I had undergone the procedure that meant I would never be a father. What are we doing here? I asked. You wanted good news, she replied. Well, let's go. I followed her into the clinic and stood to one side as she approached the reception desk. The receptionist nodded and motioned for us to sit down. We sat down. Less than 2 minutes later, my doctor came out and invited me into his office. I looked at Michelle, who made no move to follow me. Please, I said, and she nodded, seeing me out. Doctor, Harrington made no comment about the secretary's presence at my consultation. He knew who she was and that she wasn't my wife since he was Caroline's doctor as well as mine. Why I had asked the secretary to come with me was my business, not his. Oh, Gary, he said. I understand you wanted to ask about reversing your vasectomy. My eyes widened. I wondered if that was even possible. I looked at Michelle. A faint smile appeared on her face. Yes, is it possible? Of course, Dr. Harrington replied. Since your vasectomy was performed less than 3 years ago, the success rate for gender reassignment surgery is about 95%. The operation is a little longer than the original one and requires general anesthesia, but I'm confident that after it, you'll be able to become a father again. Once again, my eyes filled with tears. I still had a chance to become a father. It would require surgery, but that was a small price to pay for the opportunity to have children of my own. I didn't know who I would have children with, but at least I had that option. I know this is difficult to accept, said the doctor. Here is some information about the surgery and the cost. Unfortunately, your insurance will not cover the expenses. If you want to proceed, let me know and we will schedule you for an examination. Thank you, doctor, Michelle said, standing up and taking the information from his hands. We'll be in touch. I stood up too and let her walk me out of the clinic to her car. Is it good news? She asked, smiling at me. Giving in to the impulse, I hugged her and pulled her close. Thanks, I said, burying my face in her hair. And then I realized what I had done. I instantly let go of her and took a step back. I'm sorry, I said. Gary, she said softly. It's okay. We got into her car. "One more stop and we'll be back at the office," she said. Over the years that Caroline had worked for him, I had been to Bill Wayne's house several times. He and his wife Stephanie lived in a nice neighborhood outside of town. It was a gated community. Corporate events were held there. "Why?" I asked. Michelle got out of the car and walked to the front door. I followed her. She didn't even have to knock. Stephanie had already told the security guard we were there and was standing at the door waiting for us. "Gary," she greeted us. "You must be Michelle, his secretary? Did you call?" "Yes, that's me," Michelle replied. "Come in," said Stephanie. She led us into a room that looked like an office located next to the hallway. I had never been in this room before. Judging by the photos on the desk and on the wall, it was Bill's office, but she sat down at the desk and pointed to chairs at the other end of the room. She seemed to have decided that this was not a personal visit. How can I help you?" Stephanie asked, looking at me. I sat there staring at her, unable to say a word. "Did you know?" I finally asked. Stephanie sighed sadly. "No," she said. "I suspected, but I never knew for sure. I couldn't find any proof. Nothing I could take to a lawyer, or I would have taken every penny from that bastard." "Get in line," Michelle growled. "Do you have proof?" Stephanie asked, and I nodded. "Proof that none of my children are mine, that they have the same father. A video of him and Caroline in my house, where my son calls him Dad." I couldn't finish the sentence. The lump in my throat prevented me from speaking, and I lost my train of thought again. "Oh, Gary, I'm so sorry," she said. "I've suspected him and Caroline for a long time, but he was so careful I followed him. Checked his phone, his email. I even confronted him. But he managed to convince me that I was just being paranoid. The private investigator I hired found nothing. To be honest, if I had been sure, if I had had proof, I would have come to you right away. But I couldn't destroy what seemed like a happy marriage based on mere suspicions. I needed to be sure, and I never found any proof." "What are you going to do?" I wondered whether I should tell my enemy's wife about my plans. I wasn't sure she wouldn't tell him everything when he got home. It might have been too late for him to do anything meaningful, but I wanted it to be as much of a shock to him as it was to me. "The question is, what are you going to do?" I asked. "Now you have proof." She smiled slightly. "I understand," she said, "and I don't blame you. I wouldn't have told you either. If you have the number of a good divorce lawyer, I'd be very grateful." Michelle took a business card out of her purse and handed it to her. "Thanks," she said. "A week isn't enough time?" I nodded. "Great," she said. "I'll get in touch with—" She held out her business card. "And you can arrange everything with her." She stood up. Apparently, our meeting was over. Michelle and I stood up too. Stephanie came over, hugged me, and kissed me on the cheek. "I'm sorry again," she said. "Take care of him," she said to Michelle, who flinched as she hugged me. "He deserves better than what that bitch did to him." We returned to the office, and I spent the rest of the day finishing up things that needed to be done while I was in Portland. At the end of the day, I came home. Michelle knocked on my door at the usual time, peeked in, and said she was leaving for the evening. She was back to being the professional she always was. That made me feel a sense of loss as well. I thought I was starting to get closer to her, but maybe that was just my imagination. I wished her good night and thanked her for her help. I stayed late at the office. I had a lot of catching up to do. "What time will you be home?" At around 8, I got a message from Caroline. "Another hour or so, I have to finish up something from my trip. I'll probably be asleep by then. I have to get up early. Love you, Kex X." Again, I couldn't bring myself to reply to the message. I kept working until almost 11. I really wanted her to be asleep when I got home. The less I had to talk to her, the better I would feel. When I got home, the house was dimly lit. Nothing unusual. I checked on Sonia and James. They were both asleep and looked as sweet as ever. A sob caught in my throat and I hid in the bathroom. I couldn't let Caroline find me crying over children who weren't even mine. I still hadn't decided what to do with the children. It was unlikely that either of them would remember me if I just left. I had no responsibility for them, but I loved them both anyway. How could I abandon them when, less than a day ago, they were my children, my flesh and blood, my pride and joy? And now, they were just more proof of my horror of a wife's infidelity. I decided to wait and see what happened next. In any case, the decision might not be in my favor. I went to bed, trying not to wake Caroline. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, and when the alarm went off in the morning, Caroline was already gone. When I entered the house, the nanny was feeding the children in the kitchen. I looked at her. She had to know. There was no way she didn't know. Maybe she was still looking at me and laughing at the stupid idiot who couldn't even satisfy his wife. Maybe she knew the kids weren't even mine. Maybe she took the kids away so they could say goodnight to Daddy Bill, like she often did to me. A picture flashed through my mind of her and Caroline having a threesome with Bill Wainwright, while the kids cried in the next room. I shook my head viciously. She knew, I decided. And on Monday, I would fire her with great pleasure. I would make sure that little bitch never worked as a nanny again. I would tell the agency, wait, what am I doing? I'm taking out my anger on someone who has a little chance of doing the right thing in this situation. No matter what I do, it's going to be bad. If she tells me she'll lose her job. She could leave, I thought, but she seemed attached to our children whom she had cared for since Sonia was born. I was furious, but probably at the wrong person. I went to work. When I arrived, Michelle was already at the office. It was as if the previous 2 days had never happened. She was completely absorbed in her work, although I noticed in my diary that she had set aside the day for what she called marketing. I settled into my office and she brought me my morning coffee, as she had done every day for the 9 years she had worked for me. Then she sat down across the desk. Only then did I notice that she had brought coffee for herself. She had never done that before. Marketing? I asked. Since when am I in marketing? She smiled. It was a rather wicked smile, but for some reason it made me feel warm inside. We need to come up with a plan, she said. The last part of Lorraine's strategy. I looked at her, confused. What? I asked. Tell everyone, Michelle replied. Her friends, her family, her church members, her volunteers. Everyone she talks to needs to know what a whore she is and what she's done. That won't make me look good, I said. I'll be a laughingstock. A cuckold who can't satisfy his wife raising someone else's bastards. You have to tell your story, she said. If you don't, Caroline will, and believe me, she'll make you look much worse than some unknown cuckold. How about a violent husband? Or someone who abuses his children? People will believe that nonsense, and when we blow this up, she'll have all the answers. Get the word out first, and people will be less inclined to believe any accusations in response. Sure, some will believe it, but there's nothing you can do about that. Michelle put together a media kit containing all the evidence of Caroline's infidelity. There was a private investigator's report, copies of the DNA test report proving that I was not the father of my 2 children. There were copies of videos taken in my home, including one of James greeting Bill, and videos from the bedroom that I had not seen and did not want to see. Later that morning, I received an email from Lorraine. It turned out that Stephanie had given her a sample of Bill's DNA. She compared it to the results of my DNA test, and it turned out that he was indeed the father of both children. I froze. Children? I thought, suddenly no longer thinking of them as his children. We included this new information in the package and prepared it for shipment. They would be sent to Caroline's parents, my parents, and Caroline's brother and sister, whom I was very close to. Electronic copies would be sent to all of her Facebook and LinkedIn contacts, as well as anyone else I could send them to. I paid a courier to deliver the ones addressed to her immediate family at 10 a.m. on Monday, when the balloon was scheduled to take off. All I had to do was get through the weekend. I had a plan for that, too. Since I'm an engineer, it took me less than an hour to design and assemble a small device. It had a motor, a timer, and a battery. I set it up so that the motor would rotate, creating a vibration at regular intervals. On Friday evening, I came home and when the maid left, hid the device under Sophie's pillow. It was set to go off at 6 in the morning, around the time we usually wake up. It would wake Sophie up, and that would put an end to our weekend morning sex. Everything was perfect. I was woken up by Sophie, who came into our room and climbed into bed with us, so no sex, I smiled to myself. On Saturday, I managed to keep myself busy all day, doing all the housework Caroline had been asking me to do for months. When she noticed, I just said it was about time I did it, since she'd been nagging me for so long. On Saturday evening, when Caroline, strangely enough, tried to seduce me into having sex, I pretended to be asleep when she came out of the bathroom, and on Sunday her daughter came into her room again, awakened by my device. On Sunday, we decided to take the kids for a walk and spend the day at the zoo. All day long I looked at Caroline, the woman I loved, the woman I thought I loved, and the two children I cared for, thinking they were mine, and several times I almost burst into tears. I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled, trying to hold back my emotions, but I held out all weekend. On Monday, I was nervous. I told Caroline I would be working from home. I wanted to talk to the housekeeper. Caroline left for work at the usual time, stopping by my office to say goodbye. I pretended to be absorbed in my email and just hummed in response. I heard her car pull out of the garage and the door close. I looked at the clock, 8:15. The housekeeper knocked on my office door. She wanted to take the children to the play center, but I said no, they had to stay home. This surprised her. I had never refused her before, but she just nodded and went back to the children. I could hear James getting upset that he couldn't go, and he really wanted to. Just after 9, Michelle pulled up to the house. I was surprised, but I let her in. For the first time since I'd known her, I made her a cup of coffee. At 9:30, we had a conference call with Lorraine. "Gary," Lorraine said, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm just saying that if you had any doubts over the weekend, now is the time to voice them." "No," I replied. "No doubts." "Then I'll see you on the other side," Lorraine said. And so it went. I kept checking my mailbox, waiting for the confirmation letter. At exactly 10 a.m., the first one arrived, followed by a second 3 minutes later and a third 5 minutes after that. Then the phone rang. It wasn't Caroline, as I had expected, but my mother. "Gary?" she answered. "Hi, Mom," I said. "What's going on?" she asked. "Did you read the package I sent you?" I asked. "Yes, but then you know as much as I do," I said. "Caroline has been cheating on me, probably for our entire life together, with her boss. The children are not mine. I am divorcing that woman." "Gary, you can't." "No, Mom. Listen, I have to go. I need to call someone else." I hung up. At that moment, the phone rang again. This time it was Caroline. "Gary." I didn't answer, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk," she continued. I still didn't answer. "I'm on my way home." She hung up. "Caroline's on her way," I told Michelle. "I won't bother you," she replied. I wanted to ask her to stay, but I didn't know how. I just stared at her. "Call me," she said, "when you figure out what's going on." And she left. Caroline came home about 20 minutes later. I heard her car pull into the driveway. She didn't even bother to pull into the garage. I didn't know what to expect when she came into the house. I didn't know if she would come in with a gun in her hand or slip in with her tail between her legs. Either way, she walked into my office and sat down across from me at my desk. "Gary," she began. "I don't care," I interrupted. "But I don't care," I said. "You don't even want to—" "No," I said. "I don't want to hear a word you have to say. You lied to me for 9 long years. None of those children are mine, but you convinced me to have a vasectomy while you were on birth control so you could continue having fun with Daddy Bill." Her eyes widened at these words. "So no, Caroline," I continued. "I don't care what you have to say. My lawyer's card is in the envelope you got with the court papers. If you think I need to know something, talk to her." "What about the children?" she asked. "What about the children?" I replied. "I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I never would have had any. I would ask you why you did this to me, but I don't want to hear another lie. I really don't care about your excuses, explanations, or reasons. I just want this to be over so I can pick up the pieces of my life and move on." I called my assistant into the room. I knew she could hear me because my office door was open and she was in the next room. "You're fired," I said, effective immediately. "Get your things and shut up." "What?" she asked. "Why?" "Because you covered for her," I said, pointing at Caroline. "You knew she was having an affair with her boss. I don't know if you knew the children were his and not mine, but you definitely knew what was going on. I have a video of you talking to Bill about the children. Get out." "Gary," Caroline said, "you can't fire her. I pay her salary." The housekeeper looked at Caroline with gratitude in her eyes. "Fine," I said. "I've already contacted the agency and informed them that you were involved in an extramarital affair, and I've agreed not to take any action against their company if they fire you. So if Caroline wants to keep you on, she'll have to not only pay your salary but also take care of everything else: taxes, vacation, retirement, sick pay, not to mention insurance." The assistant's face turned pale. Not only was she losing her job, but she was also leaving the agency. That would make it almost impossible for her to find another job working from home. The agency representatives conferred among themselves. "Now go," I said, and she ran away. "Did you have to do that?" Caroline asked. "She didn't have to." "You're at it again," I said. "I said I don't want to hear it. I want you to pack your things, get the kids, and get out of my house." "This is my house too," she said. "According to the documents, it's not," I replied. "It's only in my name. So until the court decides otherwise, get out of here." She flinched slightly when I called her. James entered the room. "Mommy?" he asked. Sonia fell. Caroline, looking stunned and with tears streaming down her cheeks, stood up and went to her daughter. I closed the door to my office and stayed inside while she gathered her things. A few minutes later, she returned, holding Sonia in her arms. "Are you going to say goodbye to—" "Don't say that," I said. "She's not my daughter and he's not my son. Take them to Bill. Let him take care of his children." "I don't want them." "Gary, Get out." I heard the front door close, and a few minutes later her car started up. She was gone. I exhaled the air that seemed to have been trapped in my lungs for an eternity. I was in shock. I didn't hear the door open and jumped when arms wrapped around me and I fell, burying my face in my hands. When I looked up, I saw Michelle hugging me. She pulled me close and held me while I cried. It took me a few minutes to collect my thoughts. I had just thrown away 9 years. My marriage, my children, my life were gone. I didn't want to face the world anymore. Michelle took charge again. "Let's go," she said. Lorraine said it would take Caroline about 4 hours to get a temporary restraining order. She has children, and this is a family home. She's going to come back. Do you really want to give her the satisfaction of kicking you out of your own home? We gathered my belongings and all my important documents. I had to decide where to stay, but I loaded my things into my car and Michelle's car and drove away. First, we went to the office where I had been handed the documents that day. Lorraine called me and said she was waiting for the bailiff. Not only was there a warrant for the house, but she was also prohibited from coming within 100 meters of it. If I wanted to retrieve anything, I had to make an appointment and be accompanied by Caroline's lawyer at my own expense. Not understanding what was happening, I moved into Michelle's spare room. All my clothes were in the closet, and all my documents were neatly filed in the cabinets in the office. A week passed since my conversation with Caroline. I worked, then returned to her house with Michelle to have dinner and go to bed. In the morning, she brought me coffee, made breakfast, and we went to the office together. Between us, nothing seemed to have changed. She was still businesslike, and except for the hug when I broke down in tears at her house on the first day, I never smiled at her. However, I had many reasons to smile. On Monday morning, we had a meeting with the lawyers for the company Caroline and Bill worked for. I didn't know the details, but from what I could gather, we had filed a lawsuit for an amount the company couldn't afford. They had insurance, but the maximum coverage was $1 million, and we were asking for much more. Their lawyers were businesslike. Lorraine, my lawyer, was smiling like the Cheshire Cat. "What will it take for you to agree to this?" the lawyer asked. "Immediate dismissal with forfeiture of retirement benefits," Lorraine replied, "and a commitment to keep Caroline on the payroll for at least 3 years and pay $1.5 million. I didn't really listen as they exchanged phrases. In the end, they agreed to all of the above, but I would only get about $750,000. At least that would cover part of my debt to the company's pension fund. "All of this will be paid after the divorce is finalized," Lorraine said. They nodded. They understood. Lorraine stayed with us for the next meeting. It was a meeting with Bill Wayne's lawyers. I left their office $500,000 richer. Now I had enough money to pay off the pension fund loan in full, with a little left over. Or maybe there would be something left after the divorce. The last appointment of the day was with Caroline's lawyers. Caroline was in the office with them, but she didn't look at me when I walked in. Michelle was with me, as was Lorraine. "This report in the divorce petition is laughable," Caroline's lawyer began. "Your client is the majority shareholder and CEO of a company that is currently valued at around $20 million, not to mention assets such as a house, savings, and a pension fund. I suggest—" "Let me interrupt you," Lorraine said, pulling a stack of papers out of her briefcase. "According to the prenuptial agreement signed by all parties, the company is not subject to division in the event of divorce. My client recently invested significant additional funds in the company, which amounted to most of his savings, his entire 401k retirement plan, and a loan secured by his home. He also had to take out a loan from the company's pension fund. One of the partners wanted to get rid of the company, and it was important that the shares not fall into the hands of a competitor who had been trying to take over the business for several years. Since the loan from the pension fund means a reduction in his salary, he now earns less than your client, I'm going to go to court to request alimony so he can hold out until he finds the strength to move on. What about the children? Her lawyer asked. There is DNA evidence that these children are not his, Lorraine said. She deliberately forged birth certificates to register my client as the father in order to defraud him. In addition, as a separate issue, we will seek damages for serious assault when she knowingly persuaded him to undergo surgical sterilization, which he agreed to, believing that he was the father of the children. The alternative for your client is to sign the divorce papers as they are, gather her belongings, and leave the family home to him. She will receive half of the joint account, which currently has a balance of $9,443.15. The lawyer looked at the documents, at the prenuptial agreement, and then at Caroline. She looked at me for the first time. Gary, please, she said. 9 years, I said. 9 long years. You lied to me for 9 years, day after day. You have nothing to say to me that I want to hear. Caroline looked at her lawyer and nodded. She signed the papers. I wasn't there when she left the house. I just got a letter from her lawyers saying that the restraining order has been lifted and the house is now mine. I can go back there anytime. I thought about it, but decided not to. Instead, I put the house up for sale. The asking price wasn't quite what I owed the bank, but I made up the difference and the bank was satisfied. 2 months passed and I was still living in Michelle's spare room. After our divorce, Caroline moved in with her parents. Despite all the evidence I provided, they stood firmly by her side and refused to speak to me. It was no loss to me. For some reason, Stephanie didn't divorce Bill as she had promised. I didn't know why and didn't want to know. Since he lost his corporate job and pension, they had to sell their house in a gated community and move into a small apartment. Bill still had connections and marketable skills, so he managed to find a decent job and make a living, though not as much as before. I didn't know that he and Caroline were still seeing each other. I hadn't seen her since that day at her lawyer's office and wasn't interested in finding out. I was sitting at my desk at work when Michelle knocked and, without waiting for an answer, entered the room. Bill Waynate is dead, she announced indifferently. What? I replied. How? Apparently, Stephanie caught him with Caroline again, she said. She shot him. I leaned back in my chair and a broad smile spread across my face. I tried to hide it, but I couldn't. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, I finally said. Michelle laughed. Was I being rude? I asked. For being so happy? Not at all, Michelle replied. That bastard got what he deserved. By the way, this just arrived. With an official look, she placed the envelope on my desk. I looked at it with trepidation. We both knew what was inside. I picked it up and opened it. Here it is, I said. Finally, I'm a free man. Finally, said Michelle. Then she did the last thing I expected. She kissed me. It wasn't a kiss on the cheek or even on the lips, but a full-blown kiss with tongue, lips, and fingers. When she finally let go of me, I leaned back in my chair, gasping for breath, stunned and tense, like the mast of a T-clipper. She giggled, lowering her eyes and noticing my obvious arousal. 9 years, she said. I've cared for you. You're the most perfect man I've ever met. You never once looked at me funny, never looked at my legs or my ass, never touched me. And I loved you for that. I've waited 9 years for you. And now you're free. I know you've always respected me. And that's love, too. We make a great team. I know you as well as any wife knows her husband. And when you think about it, you know me just as well. Give me a chance to show you that not all women are deceitful, cunning, scheming. Please? I was stunned. I remembered all the time I had spent with her before I found out about her affair. I thought about how I had treated her. I had fiercely defended her against my business partner, which had resulted in me being kicked out of the business. Then I realized that I had real feelings for Michelle and still did. I believed that it was impossible to work with someone so closely for so long and not feel anything. While I was with Caroline, there was no need to explore those feelings, to evaluate them. But now, there was definitely a need. Should I tell him? She asked. A look of concern appeared on her face. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her. How many? I asked. She looked puzzled. How many what? She asked. Children, I replied. How many children should we have? Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.